Hello world. Good morning, namaste, and Nisam Bulavinaka from Sydney, Australia. I am Sashi Singh, and welcome once again to Sashi Singh's Talking Point, our first broadcast for the month of August. In episode 30 today, we will shortly meet our chief guest, Mr. Haroon Ali Shah, former Member of Parliament in Fiji and lawyer, also a former president of the Lautoka Football Association and a current member of the Fiji Labour Party. We will discuss with Mr. Shah the FICAC action against him, his thoughts on what are the relevant issues affecting the western side of Fiji in this election year, find out his thoughts on the due process of law, and why he says a change of government in Fiji is long overdue. All that and a lot more on important questions that really matters to all Fijians. I hope wherever you are this morning, or this afternoon if you're in Fiji, you are well settled in to enjoy an enlightening interview with my chief guest. As always, may I please request that you share the SSTP page on your own timelines so that we may share the interview with Mr. Haroon Ali Shah with as many interested people as possible. To ensure that you receive instant notifications for all future programs and announcements, please like the SSTP page and follow us too. Welcome to the Thinking People's program, Sashi Singh's Talking Point, live on Facebook and on YouTube. Let me tell you, our viewers, today is a mini milestone for SSTP. We started Sashi Singh's Talking Point on 21st November 2021, when our first chief guest was Mr. Graham Everett Leong, renowned Fiji lawyer and now the Solicitor General in the Cook Islands. Today we embark on episode 30. That's right, episode 30 will air today. I worked out that in its entirety, SSTP has so far broadcast live for 83 hours and 20 minutes, and that is not counting the many hours that have gone into the preparation for each program in terms of research, etc. The SSTP team have also excelled at producing the poster trailers as well as the video trailers, which all adds to the promotion of each forthcoming episode. SSTP now has more than 6,600 dedicated and loyal followers, and this number is growing by the day. The other significant count is that the SSTP program has a reach of 95K plus viewers as per figures released by Facebook. All this is as a result of your viewership. The SSTP team thanks you, our loyal viewers. A very big Vinaka Vakalevu, and thank you to you, whichever part of the world you reside in. Thank you once again for being loyal to SSTP. And as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And from our very humble beginnings on November 2021, today we mark the 30th episode of SSTP. And with us on that journey all this while from day one, we have had Nikhil Singh with us. He has played a big part in the SSTP program. As always, we begin today's episode 30 of the SSTP program with a warm welcome to our regular contributor, former Fiji TV journalist, Nikhil Singh. Nikhil, how does it feel to hit episode 30?
Sashi, it's a privilege to be part of this platform and this program. I do remember when you first flagged this, and I thought it was an exciting, but more importantly, a much needed platform for people in Fiji and around the globe to know what is happening. As you say, Fijians want to know.
Indeed, Nikhil, and officially, I'd like to say thank you very much for your weekly contribution. And as always, you've done a sterling job. But enough of admiration and self praise, I guess, for both of us. Let's get straight to work. Let's see what's the key happenings of the political week in Fiji and Australia. Let's start with Fiji, as always, Nikhil. The Association of South Pacific Airlines has issued a challenge to Fiji's Attorney General. This is in relation to Fiji Airways being given the contract to manage and operate Airports Fiji Limited. What do you have for us on that front?
Yes, actually, I've been following this story in fact, since it made news, made headlines. The association has from day one questioned the awarding of the contract to manage and operate AFL to Fiji Airways, alleging that there is a very clear conflict of interest issue. Now, as reported in the Fiji Times, the Attorney General has claimed that a lot of countries in the world have the national carrier actually managing the airport when you have the bulk of the throughput of the airport being supplied by one airline. The association is not buying this claim, Sashi. The association has called on the Attorney General to name the country where the national airline provides airport services. The association said the Attorney General seemed to be confused about the services that Fiji airports offered, such as ground handling. They say that it is to be noted that Fiji airports does not provide ground handling such as cargo, which the AG gave as an example. The Attorney General seems to be mixing ground handling and airport operations. Shashi?
Now, Nikhil, sticking to matters relating to Fiji Airways and Airport Fiji Limited, AFL, the National Federation Party wants the government to stop being secretive about the deal between the airline and the AFL, and the party has asked the government to clarify if Fiji Airways owes money to the AFL. This seems to be a reasonable call. What's on that front?
Definitely a reasonable call. Again, reported by the Fiji Times, Sashi, this is in a statement. The National Federation Party leader, Biman Prasad, criticized the complete lack of transparency and the secretive nature of this management deal. Prasad said the issue was important because an overwhelming majority of the airline is now owned by the taxpayers and workers through government and the Fiji National Provident Fund shares. Biman Prasad said the Economy Minister, Ayasayed Kayum, should clarify whether Fiji Airways owes Fiji airports a few million dollars in fees, and if the debt will be paid, given the airline will now manage the airport company. Prasad makes a really valid suggestion here, Sashi. He says only an independent financial inquiry involving an audit of Fiji Airways would provide a true picture of the state of the airline and its dealings.
A very pertinent call from Professor Prasad there. Nikhil, last week we spoke about the Media Industry Development Act and the amendments tabled by the government. A report co authored by South Pacific Journalism Coordinator Dr. Shailendra Singh calls for the scrapping of Fiji's Media Act. Now, as reported in Fiji Village, the Fijian Media Association is concerned about the ambiguity in the new amendment and the potential for undue interference into the integrity and independence of the Fijian media. What do you have for us on this issue here, Nikhil?
Sashi, we made reference to this report in one of the episodes a few months ago, and that was when the report was in its infancy. Now, according to the Fiji Times, the national media reporting of the 2018 Fijian general elections report was launched by Dialogue Fiji in Suva last week. One of the recommendations of this report is that there is a need to scrap or reform the Media Act in Fiji. Co-author and University of the South Pacific Journalism Coordinator, Dr. Shailendra Singh, said the Act was supposed to promote professionalism in journalism. He says, however, the Act does nothing for training and development I'll say that again, the Act does nothing for training and development or journalist attrition, which are key to improving professional standards. The report said, according to various media watch groups, the Act has had a chilling effect on journalism and fostered a culture of media self-censorship. Sashi, the Fijian Media Association has also expressed concerns about and on the amendments to the Media Act. As Fiji Village reported, the association is concerned about the ambiguity in the new amendment and the potential for undue interference into the integrity and independence of the Fijian media. The association believes the amendments give too much broad power to the Media Industry Development Authority, or MIDA, that could be abused in the future to the detriment of the industry, Sashi.
That's something we will keep an eye out for, Nikhil, in coming episodes as well. Now, the Reserve Bank of Fiji's July Economic Review has been released. What are the highlights?
I've picked this from Fiji Village, Sashi. Fiji's inflation dynamics continue to be influenced by higher imported inflation of 10.7% relative to a domestic inflation rate of 3.7%. The Reserve Bank of Fiji says on the external front, Fiji's trade position deteriorated further as the trade deficit widened to 61.4% cumulative to April, with the growth in imports at 37.8%, outpacing a moderate expansion in exports at 4.4%. The substantial increase in imports was largely driven by the mineral fuel, machinery, and transport equipment, and food and live animals categories, Sashi.
All right, the National Farmers Union has questioned the Fiji Sugar Corporation and the Sugarcane Growers Council over the withholding of information on the TCTS ratio, or the tons of cane to tons of sugar ratio. What is going on here?
Sashi, this actually piqued my interest because back in the day, in our previous life, I used to get press releases from the FSU on a weekly basis on this TCTS. Now, the National Farmers Union General Secretary Mahendra Chaudhary is asking, why is this important information being withheld by FSC, and says it should be released on a weekly basis. Chaudhary is also asking, why is the Sugarcane Growers Council CEO, who is in receipt of the information, not releasing the information to its members and farmers. Chaudhary suspects the news is not all that good, and that's why there is this delay in releasing such data. He says he has reason to believe the TCTS ratio is very high because of milling inefficiency, resulting in losses to farmers and the industry as a whole. Sashi?
All right, and closer to home, it appears that John Barilaro, New York Trade Commissioner job saga, is far from over for the New South Wales government. This fiasco has forced the resignation of one minister, and if this was not bad enough, another minister was sacked by Premier Dominic Perrottet over a separate matter. That's two ministers gone in 1 week. More news on that, Nikhil?
Certainly, this saga is far from over, Sashi. We hear that John Barilaro will be fronting a committee next week, or starting from tomorrow. The ABC has reported that Stuart Ayres resigned as Deputy New South Wales Liberal leader and Trade and Investment Minister, and will be investigated for a possible breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. That is what the Premier Dominic Perrottet has announced. Earlier in the week, Sashi, as you mentioned, the Premier sacked his small businesses and fair trading minister, Eleni Petinos, after allegations of bullying were levelled against her in the media. So two ministers gone in 1 week, not quite the dream run the Premier has been hoping for.
And I believe there'll be more on that ongoing saga of the Trade Commissioner's job, so we'll keep an eye out on that as well. Now, the Anthony Albanese Labour government has ticked off one of the election promises, at least in the lower house last week, Nikhil. More on that, please.
Yes, Sashi, this is a policy on climate change that has been the talk of in the political circles for a number of years. The previous Morrison government had actually 22 policies. However, they couldn't implement a single one. This is one of the main manifesto features that Labor took to the elections, their climate action bill with a target. A bill to write the government's 43% emissions reduction target into law has passed the lower house after the government agreed to several minor amendments from the crossbench. The federal government did not need the votes of crossbenchers in the lower house to pass its climate target bill, but it agreed to support amendments moved by a number of independents. The opposition formally decided to oppose the climate target bill. However, the Liberal Tasmanian MP Bridget Archer across the floor to support this bill, Sashi.
All right, and just before you go, two very quick ones without notice, Nikhil. Another promise made by the Labour government was kept, as that refugee family from Sri Lanka, the Bilolia family, have been granted permanent residence. So that's another promise kept by the Labour government.
Certainly, Sashi. 4.5 years in incarceration. This family suffered a lot, and they were pleas made to the former Morrison government to address and resolve the issue. But we have seen the incoming Albanese government put words into action. Firstly, they were removed from detention, and now we hear that on Friday they were visited by DFED officials and were informed that they have been granted permanent resident visas. And the response from the family has been, as reported in media, Sashi, that they now feel at peace and can look forward to certainly a bright future in this country.
And just before you go, as I said, without notice to you, what's about this shooing away by Prime Minister Albanese? Is it just a storm in a teacup in Parliament?
Oh, look, I probably put it that. Look, a lot of work to be done, a lot of mess to be fixed, Sashi, and it's going to be a very busy 3 years for the Albanese government.
Nikhil, thank you so very much for your contribution today. As always, very nicely presented. Look forward to seeing you in the next program. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.
Thank you, Sashi.
Expect a call from me after the program. Thank you once again, Nikhil. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. Fijians want to know. Please like and follow the SSTP page if you have not done so. I have an important announcement to share with our viewers just before we meet our chief guest. Sashi Singh's Talking Point, SSTP, recognizes that questioning, constructive arguments, and opinions are part of conversation, but posts with aggressive personal attacks, profanity, name-calling, swearing, defamatory in nature, and/or threatening will be removed immediately, and offenders will be blocked from being a part of the SSTP program. So let's all observe the rules, let's play by the rules, and let's all enjoy the program. Love having your viewership, and I hope you enjoy the program as well. Now it's time to meet our chief guest on Sashi Singh's Talking Point this afternoon. Our chief guest today is a person I have known for more than 50 years. As you heard in my introduction, Mr. Haroon Ali Shah is a former member of Parliament and lawyer. He is also a former president of the Lautoka Football Association and a current member of the Fiji Labour Party. It is my pleasure to welcome on SSTP our chief guest, Mr. Haroon Ali Shah. Haroon, good morning from Sydney. Greetings and assalamu alaikum to you.
And wa alaikum salam to you, Shashi. Thank you for having me. And congratulations on your milestone.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is all mine. And thank you for accepting our invitation to appear on SSTP this afternoon. How's the weather in my old hometown of Lautoka?
Sunny and humid, as usual.
Wonderful. Sometimes, as you know, we're going through winter months right now here in Australia, in Sydney. And sometimes I do miss the hot and balmy Fiji weather. It is something that I long for sometimes.
Well,
All right.
yeah.
Keep going.
Go on. Now, Fiji always has wonderful weather, even at this time.
Indeed. As I always do, let me start with your early beginnings. Tell me, are you through and through Waiavi right from the beginning?
No, Sashi. I was sort of born in Tavakumbu village in Lautoka. I mean, that's not too far from Waiavi, where your dad's house used to be, remember?
Yes,
And
I do.
my early memories, I mean, most, lovable memories are those of living within a extended family in a village situation. And I mean, I was regarded as everyone's child then. And after some years, when I was about 8 years old, then we moved to Waiavi.
And then it was all Waiavi because that's where the family was actually grounded, I believe, for many,
Yes,
many, many years.
yes, and that's quite correct. Until I moved to New Zealand to study, and then further on.
Okay, now if I could just get you to move a little towards your right so we can have you center. Thank you. That'll do.
That'll
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now, who would you say was the earliest influence in your life?
My parents, firstly, mom and dad. Mom, as you know, may the Lord rest her soul. She's deceased now. So is dad. But mom was a teacher, and dad was a carpenter at the public works department. And the extended family members, being Muslims, we had a very stable in the surroundings. And like I said, with the extended family members, we grew up pretty straight and narrow, which was quite, I mean, I reminisce over those times and I say, look, it was a good upbringing, Sashi.
Indeed. Now, Mum, as a school teacher, uh, what did she instill in you and your siblings in terms of discipline?
Um, well, what comes to mind is, tell the truth always,
Hmm.
because she would put the fear of Allah into us, and like I said, but it was mostly, like I said, the fathomless love and affection that came from the parents. That's the most endearing thing. I mean, as I remember, I'm close to 17 now, and I miss them dearly. I miss both mom and dad.
Well, we all do, as in terms of our parents. Now, your dad, just as a side comment, your dad, apart from being a very good carpenter, he was also very famous for palaus. He used to cook palaus at functions. That's correct. Am I right?
All the time. You're absolutely correct. And not only that, I mean, a lot of people don't know that. Apart from his culinary art, Dad was a very good singer as well. The old ghazals and with the ramshackle of the musical instruments they had at that time, he was pretty good. They managed to, put up a few good tunes every now and then. And don't forget, Sashi, uh, at that time was also a very good grave digger. Be it a Hindu family or a Etoke family or a Muslim family, though Dad would be the first and foremost to go and lend a hand. The
Mhm.
funeral rites, that sort of thing. So I mean, that's what sort of really sort of makes me miss him so much. That he was a man of the people, my dad.
Wonderful. We all respected him as we grew up. We all knew him very well, and your mum and your siblings. Now, you mentioned New Zealand education, but before that, a product of Lautoka education.
The product of Lotoka education, primary schools, where mom was the teacher at Lotoka Muslim Primary School. And from then, what I'd finished. In those days, when you reached class 8, you had to sit for what is called a high school entrance exam. I don't know if you recall that. And of
I
course,
do.
Natambua was a go-to school in those days. My first year was at Natambua, and then I ended up in Muslim high school and did a stint at the Indian college in Suva.
Mhm.
And in 1969, I think, the first year that the University of Fiji had introduced the seventh form, which was not in the school's curriculum, not part of the school's curriculum, but at the University of the of Fiji Islands. And from there, then I went to New Zealand.
All right, and New Zealand, Auckland University.
Yes, for a year, and from there, then I moved to London.
Okay. What is your earliest memory, Haroon?
Well, earliest memories. I mean, if you go into the recesses of my mind, it's not difficult to conjure up. Sitting by the fireplace. No stoves in those days, Sashi. You have those earthen plates where you had little pots, cast iron pots, and my dad sort of, cooking for the extended family. Those are, the memorable items that really come to mind.
The good old chula.
Yes, you can say that again.
All right. Let me discuss your professional career. You were a legal practitioner for 30 odd years. How would you describe your early beginnings as a lawyer?
Well, very challenging, Sashi. When I returned from London, I was, of course, a graduate of Gray's Inn in London. When I returned to Fiji, it was very difficult for the established practitioners to take in newcomers. They were very wary of taking on new practitioners. One, because of scarcity of work and perhaps not being so affluent. But nevertheless, thanks be to the late Mr. Rishi Shankaran Nandi. I don't know if you remember him. S.R. Shankar and Company. He was associated with the late Mr. G.P. Shankaran Ba, and he was my first employer. I did a year or two with him and then moved on to the government service in Suva. Actually, I joined the Attorney General's office in Suva, Sashi, before I opened up my own practice.
Right. And how was that experience in the Attorney General's office?
Well, good. Trying tough times. Being a newcomer with a cubicle, you're working in a cubicle all alone. It was quite tough, at that time, and being hauled up before the seniors. I worked with Mr. Justice Pathik. You might remember he was the
Yes.
Administrator General before he became a judge. So I'd worked
Yeah.
for him, and then from there, then I'd moved on to the Ombudsman's office. The late Justice Sir Moti Tikaram. I worked for him as well. A dear man, a great man.
What would you say was the best moment of your legal career?
Or getting through challenging cases. Sometimes, I'm like, I dealt with both criminal and civil briefs.
Hmm.
And there are times, particularly within the criminal domain, when you feel like, you know, it's a hopeless case. The evidence is against you, the other counsel is against you, and you're looking, it's not a level playing field. But then, lo and behold, you pull something out of the hat, and you finally, at that time in the High Court, we had assessors in the Magistrates Court, of course, but it is now just a magistrate all by himself. But there were times when, you pulled off the impossible. I mean, it was not about winning or losing, but it was just delivering to the client what his instructions were. At the end of the day, a smile on your client's face, and that's what you relished. That's what you wanted.
Yes,
You know,
that's what all lawyers want, to pull that out of the hat and to represent your client as best as you can. Now, you then unfortunately lost your practicing certificate when a finding of professional misconduct and unsatisfactory conduct was made against you. Briefly, what was the background of this?
Sashi, lawyers, particularly in Fiji, it's a unified profession. There's no division between solicitors and barristers. It's just the one stream, of work that we have, advocacy in court and soliciting in the office. And lawyers, practitioners here in, well, everywhere, when they deal with trust accounts, they walk a very thin red line one should never cross. And when you repose, implicit trust in your staff, you expect the best from them, that all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. But sometimes when you get red carded, Sashi, that's the way it goes. I mean, I have no, gripe about it. I played by the rules, and I was shunted out of the practice. But I won't say more about that. But because still sub judice, my application for readmission to the solicitors and barristers roles is now the subject of an appeal to the Court of Appeal. So
All right.
I will not make any further comments on it, but just a word of
Now,
caution. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I think you've said enough. I will not
Yes.
press on that point. You are absolutely right, because as a practicing lawyer, I certainly know the trust account is something that is more or less sacrosanct. And if you rely on staff, etc., let's leave it at that. I'm lucky. I have a very, very good a trust accountant who manages everything in my office. So I'm very, very fortunate
I'm
there.
much the wiser now, Sashi.
Indeed, indeed. You've got to keep on things, top of things. Now, as I said, you were disbarred for 8 years. On a personal note, what impact did this have on you, both professionally and on a personal level?
Well, professionally, I was out of our mainstream. Well, you can't practice once you're disbarred, once you're struck from the role, Sashi, you don't practice. But like I said, you can't take the law out of a lawyer, a has-been lawyer. The law always stays with you. I mean, it's in my blood. Now, and there is life outside the courtroom. I have blended in with the people around me, my community, my religious groups, my children, my family. So, like I said, the knowledge that I have, I imparted that, FOC, pro bono to everybody. And I read articles. I'm an avid reader. I read most of the legal stuff that is circulated and available in Fiji. Still, I relish law and the practice. And I read cases about lawyers, about people, about the important cases that, are under consideration here in the Fiji courts. Like I said, law is a living, breathing thing. I mean, I just can't get away from it.
Wonderfully said. Now, you just mentioned you're appealing your readmission after serving the period of suspension. What hopes do you have to re-enter the legal fraternity?
Well, the primary consideration by an appellate court would be that in the time lapse that I've had since I've been disbarred, we're looking at about 10 years plus, look, is there an element of rehabilitation? That's the first thing they look at. Now, within the criminal domain, you have what is called a Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. So if you've been convicted of a crime and that crime has been recorded in the Criminal Records Office that we have here in Fiji, after a lapse of 10 years, it is expunged from the records. You're given a clean slate. So maybe that will be one of the main principal arguments. Look, given the circumstances, you might say, I'm a born again sort of lawyer, and not likely to be a repeat offender. That's what the appellate court would look at. And then it will be up to my counsel to be able to persuade the appellate court that I will not be a danger or a threat to society, because it's the public interest that needs to be protected, not so much my interest, but it's the public interest if I were allowed to practice again. So I've instructed my solicitors, let them do the good work. Let's see what happens.
Well, fingers crossed that you do enter the legal profession. I certainly look forward to that. And I wish you all the very best in terms of your appeal.
Thank you for your sentiment, Sashi.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, Haroon, let me now explore your early political aspirations. Which political party did you first affiliate with?
Or the rate pass in the local government elections. You will recall, and I bet you can't ever forget, that your dad was one of the prime movers in those days when we used to fight local city council elections. And I had a ticket, and of course, I lost against the late Mr. Ravindra Singh, which is good. I congratulated him. Good man. I looked up to him. But that was the one and only time at that stage at the local level. And then after my return from the UK and getting into the law practice here, I joined the Labour Party. Thanks be to Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry, the current leader of the Labour Party. He showed an interest in me, and I, said I accepted it. And God willing, my first election fight in 1999, and I became a member of Parliament.
I'll
Labour
discuss
Party.
that with you. Yeah, that particular win, I'll discuss that with you in just a moment or so. But before that, what was the driving force behind your interest in politics?
The driving force is the belief, Sashi, that you need to give back to society of, say, what you value in your life. For example, I feel that being, serving others rather than being selfish, you have to be selfless. I want to be part of society. I want to leave a legacy behind, that with my knowledge, with my travels, with the amount of literature that is in my repertoire. I mean, I'm able to give something back to society, be it in politics or just general, guidance to good living, to being a good citizen. Those are the driving force elements, which made me join the Labour Party. And of course, the Labour Party's policy at the time, which still is now very attractive, for the people. I mean, always for the people. And that's it, Sashi. I just want to give more of myself. Let's put it that way.
All right, wonderful. I've asked you about the driving force behind your interest in politics. Let me now ask you, what would you say was the inspiration for you insofar as your interest in politics was concerned?
Well, for one, Sashi, I'm a blabbermouth. I love talking. A barrister is an utter barrister. He talks all the time in court. That's what barristers do. You as a lawyer, I mean, you would know, right? And if you have the art of persuasion, you think you can persuade people to your way of thinking. You say, look, you've achieved something. But the inspirational force was, I just wanted to be seen as somebody that can do good, on policies, on a political platform. Within a community. I mean, overall in Fiji, I mean, look, you must remember that in those days we fought along constituency lines. Like Fiji was cut up into little compartments. Vanua Levu has its own compartments. Viti Levu had its own divisions. But nevertheless, the people would come to know of you through the media, through your presentations, through the several public speaking engagements. So people would come to know, oh, that's Mr. Shah, that sort of thing. It's just that I just wanted to be one with the people, get them to my way of thinking.
All right. Now, the Fiji Labour Party, you mentioned that. What was about the party that was so attractive to you?
Sashi, it was the clarity of the policies of the Fiji Labour Party from its very beginnings in 1985. I mean, it was to start off with, for the Labour people. But along with the Labour people, it had a global concept and an inclusive policy that the life of the people, as it was then, when when first Labour Party started, should be, what you might say, there should be an incremental goodness about things that can be done from the top downwards. That's what we were looking at. And of course, it was, I think, more or less Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry's charisma. I mean, the man is articulate, he's very eloquent, his policies were good, and he had a very good team with him. And that is what drew me towards the Labour Party. And I said, and of course, don't forget, Sashi, at that point in time, even before that time, my uncle, the late Mr. Chirag Ali Shah, was a member of the National Federation Party. And of course, I had many overtures from my uncle saying Haroon joined the Federation Party. But it was the Labour Party, that clinched the deal at that point in time, so to speak.
Okay. Now, you briefly referred to, just a moment ago, the 1999 general elections. You contested that election for the Lautoka Open constituency. Your main opponent was from the National Federation Party. You won the seat with a final tally vote of 9,799 votes, or 64.1% of the votes cast. How was that experience for you, that win?
Well, it was a revelation. It was the first time that I had stood for national politics. And, I was known. I was not, you might say, an unknown quantity or quality at that point in time. But I think a lot of credit should go to, the Labour platform because its policies were good, its teamwork was good. It was a team effort, and I mean, I won. I mean, I must say at that point in time, I didn't sort of calibrate the percentage of votes that you sort of had over your opponents, that sort of thing. And our win, at that point in time, it was glorious. Our win, it was good as anything at that point in time. But a lot of credit goes to the Labour Party itself.
How would you describe your experience in Parliament when you first got into Parliament? Was it all that you expected? This was, of course, at a time when Parliament functioned quite differently to how it does today. Today's Parliament, I'll discuss that with you separately down the track. But what was that experience like for you that very first time?
It was Parliament. It was a very hallowed house. We had two levels. You had the members of Parliament, and then you have the Senate, and of course, on our side, of course, at every Parliament, government of the day, you have the government whip, and I was, of course, a backbencher. I, of course, was not a minister, albeit I had a short stint at being the Attorney General, and it was it's much to be cherished. Your timeline would come in, and the speaker had said, "All right, Mr. Shah, it's your time to go," from the outset, like the maiden speech, and then when you're speaking on bills or proposed bills or amendments for that matter, or for that matter, select committees. It was a good experience. It strengthens the moral fiber on you, Sashi.
Okay. Then you left the Fiji Labour Party. Why did you leave the FLP?
At the time, yes,
Yes.
This was at a very, very critical time after the bulk of the Labour Party members were released from captivity, if you remember, where they were taken in 2000.
2000.
After the release, we had a few caucus meetings and meetings around the country, and there was a divergence of certain policy lines, with Dr. Tupeni Bamba being sort of more or less. I was more inclined towards his way of thinking as to the direction that the Fiji Labour Party should take at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And of course, then that's where you see the division between the Fiji Labour Party and the setting up of the the New Unity Labour Party.
Right.
If you remember. And of course, we lost out badly in the elections that followed.
So what was the motive behind the formation of the New Labour Unity Party?
There was nothing malicious about the motives in forming a New Labour Unity Party. It just, look, Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry was still the leader at that point in time, and Dr. Tupeni Bamba was more or less, to me at that point in time, he seemed a better option with his views, with the level of security that we needed to have if a new government was going to be formed. We were looking at elections anyway. And like I said, Dr. Tupeni Bamba's, to the group of his, the comrades, we were with Dr. Tupeni Bamba, felt that maybe he was a better option. Let's put it this way. We hedged our bets with Dr. Tupeni Bamba and said, look, let's have some new policies which are a little different from the Labour Party policy at that material time. And of course, the rest is history,
Yes, and coming to that history, you then contested elections in 2001 under the banner of the New Labour Unity Party. The Fiji Labour Party fielded our friend Daniel Urai, and in a closely fought contest battle with the SDL, Daniel did win. You, as
yes,
you said, you were trounced in that election. And
absolutely. I have no misgivings about it.
Yes, you got 9.32% of the votes. How did that make you feel after that trouncing?
it was like I said, I didn't grimace about it. Felt comfortable. I didn't lose my deposit. So and, like I said, I look towards the future. I kept abreast of political developments in Fiji.
Mhm.
Uh, Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry remained very near and dear to me, like Dr. Tupeni Bamba. And like I said, there was no acrimony. There was no public outcry of saying, like I said, we accepted it. We accepted it as politicians should.
Okay, all right. Have a break, have a drink of water if you need to. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Mr. Haroon Ali Shah, former Member of Parliament, lawyer, and a current member of the Fiji Labour Party. Please like and follow the SSTP page if you can, so that as many people can watch this program with our chief guest, Mr. Haroon Ali Shah. Haroon, you then rejoined the Fiji Labour Party. What was the motivation at this time to rejoin the FLP?
As I said earlier, Sashi, the leader, like I said, I have utmost respect for Mr. Chaudhry. He's always been focused. His policies have always been clear and direct. And a little nudge from Mr. Chaudhry, towards me, saying, "Look, Haroon, what have you been doing in the last 10 years that you've been out of law practice?" And I said, "Oh, I've just been reading on what you've been saying all along." And he said, "Well, look, come work with me." And I took up that opportunity. It's simple as that.
All right.
It was an easy transition, Sashi.
Well, that little nudge from Mr. Chaudhry prompted you into action one more time. What is it about the Fiji Labour Party message that appeals to you most?
First and foremost, it's about a rejuvenation, of the social levels of the Fiji society here. I mean,
Mhm.
Look, there's so many as facets to it. We're talking about the wages, the primary medical care, about the global economy. I'm talking about within the Fijian context, about our balance of payments, our tax levels, the lack of development. Now, most things that concern us very close to our heart are stagnant. And Labour Party has always been trying to just peel off the rust. And looking at the performance of the current government, I mean, it leaves a sour taste in the mouth. And that's why I've said, Sashi, that our motto this time is that change is long overdue. This is one thing, that how can we make the lives of people in Fiji better? I mean, the current government has good 4 solid years without much change. We are still in the doldrums. Giving them another 4 years is not going to change much. But let's give Mr. Chaudhry one opportunity. Twice he was ousted from fulfilling his policies, from guiding his team into building Fiji into the way the world should be. And my lobbying this particular time is, let's give him a chance. Let's give Mr. Chaudhry a chance. And let us see what can he do. Can he put his money where his mouth is? That's what I'm saying. That's putting it bluntly, Sashi.
All right. That is a choice that the voting public of Fiji will certainly exercise as they head to the ballot box. How do you think, Haroon, how do you think the Fiji Labour Party resonates with the general public in Fiji?
Very well. I haven't seen any recent poll figures where you have what you might say on a scale of 1 to 10. The Labour Party is somewhere between, you might say, the top, say 7 to 10, and But let me put it this way. From the circle of people that I move around in the community, this is barring the Vitilevu people, Mr. Chaudhry and the Labour Party is progressing, rapidly towards, you might say, the upper echelons, of the comparative table. I think people see that Mr. Chaudhry and the Labour Party has much to offer. In fact, I haven't read any adverse material that that Labour Party is on a wild goose chase, or Mr. Chaudhry is trying to plead on deaf ears. No, people are receptive, and the reason why they are receptive is that one man, that Mr. Chaudhry, has remained focused on his policies. That is the primary reason, Sashi.
Fair enough. You've mentioned Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry a number of times so far. What are your views on his leadership style of the Fiji Labour Party?
No nonsense, gentlemen. Absolutely. He tells you like it is. Calls a spade, and if he gives you a task, he expects you to fulfill it by the deadline. Simple as that. Oh, he is a hard master, Sashi. But he's compassionate. He listens to you. He listens to your problems. He always comes back with a solution, with a comforting word. That is what. And Sashi, in the number of appearances that I've done with Mr. Chaudhry around Vitilevu, he has been very well received by the general populace. Those days are gone when, there were, you might say, a set of wild outbursts from non-friendly elements up in meetings at the times, like stones on the tin roof, or shouting across the hallway saying, get out of here. None of that saying. In all the meetings that I can say this not because I like Mr. Chaudhry and that I'm a Labour Party guy, but I'm giving it to you as I've experienced it. People quietly listen to what he has to say. They ask questions, and there is a resounding appreciation at the end of his presentation. And that they always say this, Mr. Chaudhry, when will you come back?
Okay. All right. Some people have expressed their concerns about the Labour Party, Fiji Labour Party hierarchy as to what will happen to the party once Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry resigns, or rather, for want of a better word, retires from political life. What would you say to that? Should there be any concerns? What's in the party hierarchy to take over once Mr. Chaudhry retires? Or is that premature at this stage?
Concerns exist. There's no denying that. But looking at his health, his cognitive abilities, or this gentleman, he lived to be 100, Sashi, and he's got his sanity about him. So like I said, you have to physically be with him, see him, and say, he's all fire. He's robust, he's articulate, and he's very presentable. So, but we know the Almighty's ways. You can't guarantee. No one gets to live forever. So it is important that I feel, and I don't know, I certainly haven't spoken to him about it, but he needs to develop his proteges if he has got any, or maybe he's got to divest himself of some of his authorities. He's the main leader now. He's the leader. Well, and if he stands for elections this time, he's going to be our parliamentary leader. And hopefully, if he wins Labour Party wins the elections by a majority, he's going to be our prime minister. But certainly, he needs to hedge all his bets and make sure that there is somebody, a leader in waiting, at least, so that if he's incapacitated for whatever reason, then the other someone can at least hold the reins until we have a firm alternative leader. So at the moment, Sashi, we are not looking at any alternative leaders. That's the plain truth.
All right, well stated, and I appreciate the truthfulness of your statement. Let me now look at the merger of different political parties. You would be aware that the Fiji Labour Party had a merger or a working relationship. They had some sort of an understanding with the Unity Fiji Party. What happened to that alliance?
Whenever there is an alliance between different political parties, there is a certain confluence of ideas, um, practical applications, preparing for contingencies. When these things meet, then you have a good alliance. But if it is a loose alliance and you always state very clearly to your partner, sleeping partner, active partner, whatever it is, there arises a problem sometimes of the question of dominance. Is one party going to be the dominant party, and the other party is going to be, partner is going to be subordinate to a particular party? These things always create a rift, and it's not an acrimonious rift. The parting of the ways is very amicable. You go your own ways, and you always leave your options open and say, look, if in the event we have a majority or you have a majority, please, let's meet again. You keep your options open, Sashi. But it was a good parting. There was no acrimony about it.
All right, I'll take your word for that. Let me explore with you your thoughts on the People's Alliance and the National Federation Party Memorandum of Understanding as well. That's in place for a post-election coalition. What are your views on that merger post-election?
I am not aware of the specifics of the merger. I mean, they keep it very close to the chest, and they don't disclose to the general public that these are the matters on which we have agreed. They obviously have different policies vis-a-vis the different issues that affect the people of Fiji, but post-election mergers, primarily they'll have to resolve the allocation of the portfolios. That's the first thing that comes to mind, as who's going to be the number one, take the number one spot. You have to decide on that. And the composition of the numbers, it's a numbers game, Sashi. As when you're fighting elections, are we going to compromise and not field the candidate in your strongholds, or shall we just challenge you for the sake of challenging? These are the logistics that you have to work on, because let's put it this way. If you're going to have a bad fight in the elections, pre-election results, then obviously, you're not going to work pretty, very well when, you get to the election results. So you have to be honest. There must be a great degree of faithfulness and integrity between, the PAP and the National Federation Party. And I don't know what the mechanism is, Sashi, but I'll leave it to them. But I pray that whatever they have, that it'll work out good for them. How they juggle the numbers,
All right. I've asked you about FLP and Unity Fiji. I've asked you about PAP and NFP. Let me now ask you about the partnership or the post-election coalition mooted between Unity Fiji Party and SODELPA. Any thoughts on that?
I repeat what I just said, Sashi. It's a numbers game. There's a host of permutations that you have to consider. You just can't walk in and say, look, let's fight an election together. First of all, what is fighting an election together? Are you going to field the same number of candidates as your partner, a so-called partner? Are you going to compromise on numbers? Are you going to pre-discuss on a fixed basis the allocation of ministries? There's a lot of ifs, and it is very difficult pre-election to work on this. It's politics. It's politicians. I don't know. I don't know the workings of these two particular parties to make any firm comments on them. It'd be too much speculation, Sashi. I'm very wary of making specific comments about that union.
Okay, I certainly respect that. Now, is there any discussions within the Fiji Labour Party, any speculations at all that should they get through the threshold, that there may be a possibility of the Fiji Labour Party entering into a post-election alliance with some other political party?
As far as the national executives are concerned and the leader is concerned, I'm not aware of any moves, to engage in talks with the union at the moment. At the local level, currently I'm the president of the Lutaka branch of the Labour Party, and we have not mooted any such union or potential union at this point in time, Sashi.
Okay, let's now move our discussions to the FICAC action against you. I'd like to discuss that. This matter may be pending, therefore please use your legal experience and be mindful that you do not want to get into strife under the Electoral Act 2014. The Supervisor of Elections, Haroon, has in recent times referred you to FICAC for allegedly breaching Section 144 of the Electoral Act. Have you now been served the notice?
The Supervisor of Elections has served me a notice asking me to retract what I had allegedly said at a public gathering up towards the Luvu area. Now, he has repeatedly referred this matter to FICAC. FICAC, by its very definition, Sashi, is an independent organization. It investigates allegations of corruption, encompassing what you might say like a civil service component. It has to be an allegation of corruption that ties in some government official. In my particular case, I expressed an opinion. FICAC, you better believe me in this one, Sashi. There is no action against me by FICAC, notwithstanding the repeated calls by Arif, the chairman of the tender board, and Sanim, the supervisors of elections, to FICAC to go hold me and slap me with a charge under 144. No, nothing's happened. But they got very good qualified officers in the organization. This is the Fiji Independent Commission Against Corruption. No doubt they will exercise a level of objectivity. How do you prosecute an opinion? Sashi, you tell me. How does an opinion...
Stranger things have happened in Fiji, Haroon. I know that. And you know that for a fact. But so you've just confirmed that in so far as you are concerned, there has been no interaction with FICAC in relation...
None at all, Sashi. None at all.
Okay. So was any clarification sought on the tenders matters raised by you in that meeting? What was the location of that meeting? Near Luvu? Just slipped my mind. Doesn't really matter. Was there any clarification sought on the tenders matter by the Supervisor of Election?
None at all. Generally, look, what we did not, in my presentation, I did not go into any specifics, but I took my cue from that well-known publicized case of that Dr. Nurbano Ali's firm, picking up something like $562,000 just for giving advice on how to restructure the Reba Dairy Company. And there are similar situations where the government, the Public Tender Board, has not called for tenders. And this is what irks me, is that people higher up, particularly the one that controlled the purse strings, the Attorney General and the Prime Minister, being the Attorney General being the Minister of Finance at times, that raised no inquiry into these matters. The Court of Appeal quite clearly said that this payment, this $500,000+ that went to that particular accounting firm, was irregular. It was unauthorized payments. No inquiry was held. No due diligence was sought. And several things have moved along that line. And this is why I'm so upset that it all seems to be, it's all right. It's all in the family. And when I'm saying it's all in the family, I'm talking about the AG, Nur Bano Ali is his aunt. And, the Prime Minister is turning a blind eye. No due diligence done. Likewise, one particular scenario comes to mind, I think in 2010, when Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhary raised this issue of this particular firm being handed over the government treasury to pay ministerial salary. It has never happened before in the history of Fiji that a private accounting firm would pay ministerial salary. And to date, no acquittals have been published to show that how much money they received from the government to disburse to the ministers, what was their fees, whether this was the only accounting firm in Fiji that was capable of discharging that particular task. None of this happened. So all I asked was, there must be due diligence, there must be transparency, because it's the taxpayers' money that is involved. Now, that was an opinion. My opinion may be wrong, Sashi, but if I have reasonable grounds to hold an opinion, you can't prosecute me for that. No law under any jurisdiction, except perhaps in Russia, would prosecute me for having an opinion.
Well said. You surely call a spade a spade. That much I will give you, Haroon. And that example cited by you regarding the Rewa Dairy certainly wasn't something that was in an open tender format. That certainly stands in so far as history tells us. Let me ask you, in relation to that breach notice, etc., and you haven't been contacted by FICAC, where to for you? I mean, is it just Haroon Ali Shah going about his normal business, campaigning with the Fiji Labour Party, or is there some permeations yet to happen?
I certainly am not intimidated, but this trend, this $50,000 fine and this 10 years imprisonment. You see, there's a general common strain in most of the recent legislations. The Electoral Act and the there's more provisions in there, and the Media Act that you breach. I don't lose any sleep over it, Sashi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a positivist. When the time comes and if I'm hauled up to answer some question, I'll make myself available. But for the present moment, I am not intimidated in the least. I go about the business. I go out, campaign for the Labour Party. I go and deliver speeches wherever I'm required to. Look, giving speeches doesn't mean that you belittle or ridicule or get into personalities. You speak on issues. That's what I'm trying to put across to the listeners. That if I am talking about it, my viewpoint may be erroneous. I may be erring a little, but certainly, like what they say, there is no smoke without fire, Sashi. So, this is what we try to do. And look, any criticism, a healthy criticism of the government's current actions or their malfeasance, would be helpful. Put the guys on the right track, although it's too late to say that now. Election is just around the corner. But like I said, this is not the time to forgive. This is the time to correct the mistake. There must be moral rectitude. on the part of the people that put themselves out and saying, look at me. I can do a better job. I can do a good job. Although we have limited time, like one term is about 4 years. I don't think we'll have, any particular party will be able to make, you might say, an 80% impact on changing some of the policies of the current government. But at least it is worth a try. And the rest, you leave it in God's hands.
Do you think the general public of Fiji have concerns in relation to FICAC powers as it targets politicians?
It is a tool of intimidation in the hands of the government, no doubt about it. Because whenever they want to pass the message across that you, Mr. Citizen A, is stepping out of line, and we are going to refer it to FICAC, the ordinary folk, has the shivers down his spine. Because, look, in my years as a practitioner, and even after being disbarred, FICAC has always been on the straight and narrow path. There has been no published, or you might say proven, allegations that FICAC has acted on a personal interest at the behest of somebody in a high position in government. It has never happened. And as far as I'm concerned, they have good officers there. I expect them to exercise objectivity, look at the facts on the ground, and if need be, you want to prosecute, you prosecute. Let the courts decide. But I have not seen FICAC headhunting as much as the current administration would like, for them to do. For example, take me, for example. I'm a glaring example. They have made repeated calls in the media that referred me to the FICAC, and FICAC's going to come get me. Like I said to you, I'm not losing any sleep over that. So FICAC has some value, that it will act with proper ethics and decorum, and of course within the law. But like I said, the powers that be are wielding that as a, you might say, as a club to knock the ordinary guy down. Keep your mouth shut, don't talk too much, they'll send FICAC to you.
Okay, and how level is the playing field on the Fijian political landscape?
Well, if you know the restrictive media decrees, and the recent, the Electoral Act and the $50,000 fine and the 10 years imprisonment. So it's certainly intimidating. You have to look over your shoulders. You have to read the fine print. In fact, Sashi, it relates to the earlier question, and my answer to you was that, look, do you have to watch what you are saying? Of course you have to do. Like I said, you got to watch that you do not accuse anybody wrongly. There are authorities that if you want to refer somebody for, you might say bad conduct or criminal conduct, go to the DPP, go to the FICAC or whatever. But generally within the public podium, just for the sake of grandstanding or scoring points, do not denigrate anybody. That's my message to everybody, and to my colleagues, to my partners in the Labour Party, to my executives here within the local branch. This is very strict guidelines, not so much because of the current legislation that's in place, because do that which is right without hurting anybody. We're not here to hurt your feelings. Why? I don't relish it. I don't gain points. I don't have a good night's sleep if I've hurt somebody's feelings unreasonably. So you need to be focused, Sashi, in this particular political campaign before the writ of elections is announced. But one thing sends like a sore thumb. One needs to tread very carefully.
All right. Let me now discuss a couple of examples with you. First one, Minister Koya said on Friday, the 5th of August, at the launch of the Prime Minister's International Business Award, and I quote, "The Fijian government has taken economic diversification to another level. The decisive leadership has made it capable of creating 100,000 new jobs in the new decade." End of quote. Now, under the new campaign rules, under which you yourself have been threatened with legal action by the Supervisor of Elections, do you not think that Minister Koya should be required to justify his extravagant claim of creating 100,000 new jobs?
That's the
That's
big
great.
question mark. That's a big question mark on that. I mean, it's a very categorical statement. Where is the specifics? Where is the exactitude on that statement? Jobs within which sectors? Which caliber of jobs? Or, I mean, let's say, is it already there? Or is he going to provide it? Because you must remember, Sashi, if you have a program, or you're promoting a implementation of a program, you have to establish what is the source of your funding under the new regulation. You must do not forget, Sashi, at the current point in time, we cannot publish any manifestos. But that's what a manifesto will require. What is the source of your funding? These are bare statements by the minister. My feet is on the ground here in the Western Division. I experience unemployment, homelessness, the vagrancy in the towns, in our Lotaka city, in the neighboring cities. Where are these jobs?
The reason I ask that because is he, the minister, not specifically required under Section 116 of the Financial Transaction Rules to prove the fiscal and macroeconomic viability of such a statement? Because other political parties are supposed to do exactly that.
Of course. But then you're forgetting one of the very basic practices. You never prosecute your own. That answers all the questions.
Yeah, well, you've just answered that. My second example, Haroon, is in 2018, the General Secretary of the Fiji First Party had told a campaign rally that they will make Fiji better than New Zealand and Australia. Now, in your view, if he makes any such public statements, preposterous as it may be, would he also fall foul of the law, or are those punitive laws only meant to strangle the opposition parties, their candidates and supporters? I think you've just answered that in the previous question.
Well, let me add on to that, Sashi. It's hogwash. Do you know what is hogwash, Sashi?
I most certainly do, but keep going.
I mean, let's put it this way. To even imagining, leapfrogging Fiji onto, say, the economic levels of New Zealand and Australia, I mean, God forbid. It's not even in our dream. I mean, this man is talking in the la-la land. I mean, we're so backward. You look at our what is called our basic wage levels. It's way down. Our primary health care. We do not have a robust social security system. I mean, the government is trying to do its best. It's something I don't know if you the facts and figures, but it's something like $60 a month for the over 65s. This is some kind of a financial assistance for them. And come on, Sashi, let's have our feet firmly planted on the ground. This is just trying to score points, but let's put it this way. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time, Sashi. The people are
Yes,
not just
that
going to buy it.
yes, that very famous quote from Abraham Lincoln. Um,
Absolutely.
Indeed, and I hope you stay to watch till the end of the program. You'll be surprised how I end today's program, reflecting on that very same quote. Um, you are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is Mr. Haroon Ali Shah, former Member of Parliament, lawyer, and current member of the Fiji Labour Party. Please like and follow the SSTP page and share the page if you can, so that as many people can watch this program. And I remind you, a full recording of all SST episodes from episode 1 to this one, episode 30, can be viewed either on Facebook or on YouTube. And if you've joined our program late, I said right at the very introduction, a bit of a mini milestone for SSTP. Today we celebrate our 30th episode. Haroon, let me now address with you issues that perhaps is affecting the western side of Vitilevu. You are from the west. What are some relevant considerations for the western side? I'll let you highlight these first before we discuss them perhaps one by one.
Development. We talk development in the wider sense, like buildings, widening of roads, and better parking facilities. Here, waste management. These are the things which are of immediate concern to us in the West here. Sashi, if you will remember, that the boundaries of Lautoka City has extended towards where the Natambua Bridge is. It goes up past the Natambua Road and falls up towards the Tawakumbu area, and then comes down from the Bunato Creek down to the sea here. Now, Lautoka traffic management is absolutely horrendous. That's hardly any parking spaces for the ordinary motorists that come do the shopping, particularly on the weekends or on a Thursday night through to Friday and Saturday. Most of the space has been taken up by allocating this, the curbsides to taxis. They have become taxi ranks now. I don't know what's the reason, but that's what has happened. You know that little spot between the bus station and the Asawa Street. There was an open space there that earlier, about 20, 30 years ago, that we used to have those pageants, used to call the Ram Leela in between, just by the market. Do you recall that?
I do, that little park there. And
That's right.
On Saturdays, they used to have fundraisings with Crown and Anchor games and all of that.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's all changed. It was converted into a sweet mall. You know, the mobile sweet malls, what we used to call the mithai gari, the little carts that we had.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all been removed. It's been sort of, what you call curtained on all sides. There's some development taking place. I don't know whether it's to do with more car parking space or another mall. Certainly, Sashi, do not forget that the management of the local operations is no longer in the hands of the ratepayers now. It's all centralized. You remember when Frank Bainimarama took over the national government, he likewise followed through with taking over the local government. I mean, at one time, your dad, I think, was also the special administrator of Lautoka City, as well as Singataka town. But what has happened is the ratepayers have no intercourse with the central government as to which direction, what developments should take place within the local city. Even some of our precious civic areas have been taken up by commercial entities. A good chunk of Churchill Park that's been given over to the Tapu group of companies. It's become a Tapu's city. And yes, and going up to Shirley Park, that's between just down below the post office and by the Waterfront Hotel, that open civic area. That's been given up to another group of commercial enterprise. Nothing's been built on it yet, but I believe it's been a lease has been given to a particular commercial entity. Now, there has been no transparency on this. There has been no inclusiveness of the ratepayers to say, look, do you people have an opinion as to that we want to take away your recreational areas and give it to somebody else or whatever? Or for that matter, your waste management system, what's your input? These things are not happening. It is from the top down. And with the central, with like say the two main players, that's the Prime Minister and AG, so busy with national politics. I just don't know who's handling the town and country planning issues vis-a-vis our Lautoka city. Your Vunato Creek, you remember the creek that was once the boundary line of our Lautoka city that flows into the sea past the Namoli village?
Yes, I certainly do.
You still as filthy as ever. It still remains uncovered with detritus and filth, and you might say affluent from commercial operations on the you might say the grass banks of those creeks. So it's right next to our Namoli village. The village itself, I don't know if the village has been favored with a reticulation system to pass all the effluent, up into the Natambua treatment plant. I don't know if that has happened. And then, of course, Tavakumbu village, which is within our Lautoka city now, still in a state of, you might say, neglect. The drains. Look, and these things, affect our lives. We've just been through a COVID pandemic. But if your immediate surroundings are, full of filth and detritus and stagnant water, you're not going to have a healthy society. And, health, that is most important. Here within our Lautoka city. Lautoka Hospital, I can't even talk about it for the simple reason, no visiting allowed. Since the time of the pandemic, early 2020, no visitors allowed. It's cordoned off. Look, my hats go off to the medical personnel. Wonderful. These people sacrifice their lives and their health to look after the sick, and the disabled. But the facilities, they leave a lot to be desired, Sashi. And unless and until you have local governance with the local residents, there is not going to be much improvement. Mr. Frank Bainimarama made a promise that he will relinquish the governance of local, cities back to the local ratepayers. It has never happened. He's defaulted on his promise.
Okay. Let me ask you, one Fiji First Minister recently said that open heart surgeries were about to be performed at the Lautoka Hospital. Do you buy into that? When was the last time you visited Lautoka Hospital? You just said it's locked down. You can't enter the hospital.
No, I don't go to the hospital. If something happens, I get very sick. I just homeopathy, home remedies, that sort of thing. And then I got a couple of, the wargers next door. They come up to me. A lot of listeners might know who is a warger, but like I said, on a serious note, I do not visit the hospital, save to drop off people that are really sick or close family members or neighbors that need a help for transportation. That's all I do. Keep my distance. The security officers are there. But talk about health, I'm certainly not health transplant, but at least a bypass or, like insertion of stents, that sort of thing. No, it's going to be a long time before that commences.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, another area of concern that has been expressed on our SST program by, for instance, we have spoken with Sashi Kiran from Friend, is the issue of poverty in the West. We follow closely what Sashi Kiran and Friend have done. We also are aware of a person like Alan Lockington working with poverty-stricken families at the ground level. How bad is the problem of poverty in the West?
Very prevalent. Mr. Lockington, I know of Mr. Lockington. Good man, really serious, good citizen, always concerned about the underprivileged. But on a serious note, Sashi, all you need to do is take a walk from where the old police station used to be. You remember that
Next to
old
Natamur High School.
sort of Harrod building? It's opposite the Lojaka Muslim Primary School. It is still there. If you take a walk from there eastwards towards the ANZ Bank, you'll meet on a, say, an easy count, at least 50 people extending their hands, Bhaiya help karo, please help. Both races, all races, women reclining on the pavements, bare pavements with the children, with the snuff rolling down the nose. And no, it is sad, Sashi, and it hits you in the guts that, and you cross over into the street in the what is called the Yawani Street, near the bus station at the back there, the Vitongo Parade, and the street in the between the market and the R.B. Patel Group. You got so many people that you've never seen before. Elderly people, young people, all eat okay, boys and girls, Muslim people in front of the mosque, Sashi. You just have to take count on a Friday Jummah prayer as to see the number of Muslims that stand by the mosque and the roadside extending their helps and saying, Bhaiya, brother, help karo.
Wow.
Yeah,
So what needs to happen to alleviate this poverty issue for one concern?
Give the management of the cities to the local ratepayers. We don't have look. We have one government run, the old people's home, but that's few and far between. Admissions that you have in the old people's homes. The majority of these destitutes and the homeless people that are on the streets here, they need to be on a one-on-one contact, and we need to pick them up, collect them, carry out an investigation is to see if they have a place, a shelter. Can they have forget about 3 square meals, Sashi. At least if they can have 2 square meals, some primary health care. Can we provide this to them? We need funding. We just don't have the resources. And when I say we, I mean the local, inhabitants here in the city. And you don't find many Rockefellers in Lotaka City, Sashi. So we can't get these people off the streets. But certainly we need to, have intercourse with these people, collect them, at least take them for a shower, not on a short-term basis, but at least on a long-term basis to see that why they have been abandoned. Most of them seem to have been abandoned by the immediate families.
Stemming from the issue of poverty, then, would also be the issue of unemployment. How bad is unemployment in Lautoka, for instance?
Bad. Very bad. You have the university entrance exam qualifiers that don't go on to tertiary education. You have graduates. You have dropouts from Form 6, from Form 5. You have people that have been made redundant pre-retirement age. What do? You see them by the thousands in the Lotaka city. And the people of Fiji are very industrious. They're very self-reliant. They take to selling newspapers. They take to washing your cars at traffic stops or whatever. They take to wheelbarrows. You have the wheelbarrows in Suva, the wheelbarrow boys. You know, it's a feature of Lotaka market now. We have the wheelbarrow boys. You have the shoe shine boys. But the most sort of, distressing thing is when they say, look, hey, hello, Mr. Shah. Look, I'm well recognized in the city, just like perhaps Mr. Lockington is. Mr. Shah, please, can you spare $1, please? I just need to buy my medicine, or I just want to get a square meal. These are people, educated people. What do you do? And look, add on to that this increasing drug infestation that's come about. The most common, evil is cannabis. You know what we used to call ganja, the green leaf thing. It's prevalent in Lotaka streets. Every street where you'd find someone who's offering to say, look, $5. Do you want a roll? I've come across people that saying, Mr. Shah, would you like a roll? No, not at this age. Too late in life to start, boy.
Haroon, you've highlighted the issue of poverty. We've discussed unemployment, and you've just touched on drug problems. Obviously, there is no band-aid solution to these problems. What does the Fiji Labour Party plan to do to address these issues? These are issues that affect society in general.
Well, Labour Party's policies, that's perhaps, I hope it's going to be one of the, the items that's going to be included in our manifesto. We'll have to look at the root cause of this drug problem. There's abundance of supply. There's an increase in users. And there's a lot of money that's being made in between, Sashi. A one cigarette roll equivalent of ganja will cost you $10 now. And people are selling this by the bucketful. So Labour Party's focus would be, how can we arrest the circulation, the provision? How can we stop the suppliers from bringing it into the cities? Drug addiction, we need rehabilitation. We need rehabilitation centers. These children, these addicts are homeless for the simple reason that they lose parental control. It becomes difficult for a parent to control a child that is so heavily addicted to this, this evil. That what can you do? If you want to spend your little money, your salary that you have on this errant child, you'd be taking away time and resource from other children, from the household. So what's the easiest solution? Pack your bags, mate. Get out of here. It's and then it's not gender limited. It's both boys, men and women that are afflicted with this, this problem. So Labour Party is, it needs to put in machinery that will tackle the supply, the free supply to this so-called, demand element that's within the city.
All right, you're watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point, and our chief guest today is straight shooter Mr. Haroon Ali Shah, former member of Parliament, lawyer, and a member of the Fiji Labour Party. I certainly hope you're enjoying the interview this afternoon. I certainly am. And please share and like the SSTP page if you can, so that we can share this broadcast with as many people as we can. Haroon, let me move towards a different subject altogether now. Perhaps, just before that, whilst we were discussing the ills of society, This government has been on record as saying in the past that it's a compassionate government. Your views on their compassion, please.
Compassionate, if you measure it with the number of dollars that you hand out, I mean, how do you equate that with compassion?
Well, I mean,
Well, yeah,
problems you've highlighted. For example, you've highlighted the sanitation issues in a number of places in Lautoka, for instance. Somebody else on the comments page spoke about the Vatwalevu intersection, that it is also one of those areas that's not been looked at in terms of sanitation, drains overflowing, very nasty sanitation. But looking generally, poverty, the ills of drugs, etc., where does compassion come into all of this? Because these issues are really getting out of hand, are they not?
of course they are, and it is so evident. But the point is, being compassionate means that you be an altruistic government. You be selfless, not selfish. Now, I cannot give you one instance where this government has shown compassion in the real sense.
Mhm.
I can't. This government is devoid of compassion in the true Christian sense, or even Muslim compassion sense. I've never described this government as being compassionate, Sajay.
All right.
Concerned maybe, but having not done anything about it, I mean, what do you call it? That's not compassion.
All right. Let us move on. Let me now look at how the current parliament functions. You have had the honor and the privilege of being a member of parliament. These days, as you know, what I call the bulldozer effect of Standing Order 51. Bills do not really see the light of day and are passed in quick time. What was it like in your days in Parliament to debate bills back then?
Firstly, from the moment that a bill is presented into Parliament, say at the first reading, everyone is given a fair opportunity within the time allotted to speak on the bill, and an equitable time on either side, the opposition and the government side. And if need be, on controversial bills, referral to the sector committee, the relevant sector committee, comes back to Parliament for a second reading. Once it is passed, and of course, don't forget that in between, in the in the period between the sector committee's deliberations, you also have an opportunity, if the committee or the Parliament, the cabinet so decides, let's have a talk about in Fiji, in different parts of Fiji. So you go around the country, inviting people, public discussions in the bill, then a report is tabled to Parliament, and then finally, once it's passed at the first reading, and then it's put up into the Senate, and then you had this elderly, old, mature people, let's put it, mature members, mature senators that would read the bill, give their opinions on it, suggest recommendation, amendments, or accept it as presented, then send it back, either assented to or for a reconsideration. So all legislation was very thoroughly looked at. It was cooked. We used to cook it properly, But here, what you've said is absolutely correct. From the moment that the bill is presented from the government side, no bills from the opposition gets passed because it's knocked back. But from the government side, bingo, the moment it's presented from the first reading, like you said, go up to section 51 of the standing orders, how say you? And you got that resounding scream, saying, yay, carried. So, like I said, and the opposition is left speechless. What can you do? You do not have the majority.
All right, you've just mentioned yay, and it's passed. Do you think this is a good or a bad thing, voting by acclamation?
I will not put a qualitative assessment on that, Sashi, for one reason only. Because if the response is overwhelming, if it's deafening, then you can't possibly say that some disgruntled opposition, which could possibly knock out this affirmative, the people that are affirm the bill. The only other alternative would be by a show of hands, and it achieves the same effect, Sashi.
Okay.
And well, you could have a secret ballot or voting. The only way that you can counteract that is to have to vote according to conscience. A secret ballot according to conscience.
Well,
No names,
I remember
no
on this
names, no
show.
numbers. Yeah.
Well, I remember on this show, one of my chief guests, who was a member of parliament, voted according to his conscience, and then was taken to task when the government side tallied up the votes. And enough said on that. Now, Haroon, I remember during my days in Fiji, Parliament was indeed an august house, an esteemed place, where the people's representatives gathered to pass laws, etc., as we know. There used to be a consultative process in Parliament at the best of times, and particularly in matters of importance for the nation. You will find in some overseas parliaments that they have a bipartisan approach where the national interest is paramount. How consultative a process do we have in Fiji's parliament today? Do you think it exists at all, or it is totally gone?
I live in Fiji, Shashi. I haven't exited Fiji for a long, long time, and I've been here. What is that creature that you're talking about, the consultative process? It doesn't, to me, it doesn't exist here in Fiji.
Used to.
Let's put it this way. This current government, you got the captain at the steering wheel, you've got his navigator, and that's all you need. The rest are just out there holding on to the seats for dear life. So it's a roller coaster. All right, driver. You can't even say, go easy, driver, look out for the bends and the narrows. That doesn't happen. Let me put it this way. I call a spade. Mr. Frank Varenge Benimerama, he should be the one to make the first move to the opposition and say, look, I would welcome your views on this controversy, on this bill or on this issue. How say you? We'll adjourn for 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever you do. I give you a free license. That would be wonderful if he just once, if we get to elections and he invites the opposition and say, look, can you put our heads together? I've never had that phrase from him. Can we put our heads together? All I've had is, if you open your mouths, I'll bang your heads together.
Okay. All right. Let me get your views on media freedom in Fiji now. Is there fear amongst journalists to report on politicians, on exposing the truth through investigative journalism? Do you think that fear exists in journalism, in journalists?
Yes, it does. I experience it all the time. Journalists are frightened that if they speak the truth and it gets published, they could be referred to FICAC, they could be hauled before the Media Council, or some sort of shackles would be placed on them from being forthright. Now, the Fiji Times, which has, you might say, the gumption to call a spade at all times, is always being criticized by the current government. That's always the statement. The Fiji Times is against us. The Fiji Times is providing misleading information. It is not telling the truth. And yet, we derive no comfort from the Fiji Sun. The Fiji Sun, as you would know from your investigative work, is owned by a company that's very closely associated with the Fiji current government. So it doesn't provide a balanced picture. And all that we get is from the Fiji Times. The Fiji Broadcasting Corporation, of course, it has its leaning towards the government because its head honcho is very close to the Attorney General. So, like I said, you neither prosecute your own, nor do you ridicule your own. So where do we go from there? Look over your shoulders. Think many times before you open your mouth. Do not publish anything that could get you into trouble. And that is very, very worrying trend amongst the journalists here and even the ordinary people. What do I say? To whom do I say? In what context? Before this government came into being, there was no such apprehension. Never, ever. But it is there now.
Well, I certainly understand that certain journalists in Fiji have that fear of that pending threat of a jail term or $50,000 fine, and on their basic wages that they earn as junior journalists or even senior journalists, they have this apprehension because they all have families to feed, I guess. Which brings me to integrity of the media. How much of an obligation does media owe to the people of the nation to speak the truth and not be afraid of being taken to task?
An unflinching obligation. There's no qualifications. There's no if and buts. You're reporting. You have an obligation to the people. It's a duty. It's like a unwritten your solemn undertaking to publish the truth. And let's put it this way: if your publication is going to hurt the feelings of people in high positions within the government, then you are going to be in trouble. That's that fear. It's an atmosphere of, you might say, an apprehension that surrounds us. That aura saying, look, we cannot work in an open atmosphere. This is what the journalists are worried about. And you look about the $50,000 fine. And let's put it this way. Ordinary publication. Let's talk about posts. You've heard of Mr. Aman Ravindra Singh. His case is sub judice, but he used certain labels on the Prime Minister, on the Attorney General, and it was a quick process. He was sued, failure to file defense, and he was lambasted with $120,000 damages award that he had to pay within a very short time. Following on that, his, you might say, default in not complying with that order within the stipulated time has seen him face potential jail time. It is called, it is called a committal proceedings. So what do you do? Personally, I thought it was very unfair. I mean, these people are into a receipt of good salaries. In any case, when you claim from another party, you need to establish that you've suffered a loss. But here, there was no suggestion to court that because of this publication, we've suffered any financial loss. Nevertheless, they were awarded damages. Well, we'll just have to wait and see as to what happens. But like I said, one will have journalists and citizens alike will have to tread very carefully on what they say and how they say.
Well said, which brings me to that example. If we had journalists who were always fearful, I mean, look at that. It was the Watergate affair. I mean, had it not been for Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post, we would never, ever have heard of the Watergate affair. And that is a prime example of brave and forward-coming journalism. Any comments on that?
Well, there's no room for comparing us to America. America has got its diverse laws. It's a country that we look up to. Yes. We cherish and hold dear, their application of the law, the license that are given to the media people to be able to say, comment on things as they are. Wish all we have is have wishful thinking. Could we be like that? Could we be at least 50% like them, that without the government? I mean, look at when Labour Party was in government. We welcomed criticism. We in fact, we were never infatuated or had our work stifled because you people criticizing on the side. We welcomed them. Say, look, if there are faults, please point it out to us, point it out to the public. So the next time at the polls, you give us a resounding kick up the butt and say, look, you guys just went faithful to your promises. You didn't do what you said you would do. So like I said, it's the media is supposed to be a watchdog, over our failings, particularly in the high places. If it were not for the media, you just about do anything that you want, like make any, as the moment they can. Of course, they've got the majority, but a media needs to be vigilant. And investigative journalism is what is at the root of all vigilance. Like vigilance, that you need to watch what people do in high places. Those who matter, those who make the laws, those who can make a difference.
Okay. Haroon, in the event of a change of government in Fiji, would you support a move to change the current media laws so that the shackles that binds journalists currently are removed, so that journalists can work freely, with freedom, to express what they need to express?
Right here and now, I say 110%. Well, not I, but my party, hopefully, if I can persuade them, if I can persuade my leader to promote this, scrap all the media's laws. Any media laws that attempts, even at the slightest, to stifle free reporting, truthful reporting, just bury it. I'll scrap it.
Okay. Well said. And let's just see what happens whenever the election is held. Now, let's look at a couple of other situations that affects Fiji. COVID-19 is again on the rise. Our numbers here in Australia, they are growing by the day. What impact will this have on Fiji if there is another massive outbreak?
Now, that's a real concern for the people of Fiji. COVID-19 has taken its toll. Hats off to our medical personnel who have made much sacrifice, to keep us safe. Tourism, we're on to a slow recovery. If Omicron or some other variant of COVID-19 hits Fiji and we have to shut down again with the same policies or much more stringent policies, is going to really cripple our economy. We are in sort of, a regressive growth now. The sugarcane industry is on the decline. Tourism is one life-saving option that we have. The government is working on it, trying to promote Fiji that's COVID-free. The restrictions have gone. No more masks wearing. The social distancing has been removed. But as you say, Sashi, it's very, very worrying. If it hits us again, we will be in serious trouble.
So, in other words, you're sort of saying that Fiji may not be ready for another wave of a COVID attack.
Of course we can't be. I mean, we look at the resources, all our antidotes, the vaccines, that has to be carried to us. We can't produce, we don't have the resources to buy unless the benevolent governments give us the vaccines. We're going to be in trouble. I mean, loss of lives, the disability that's going to be there, the after effects of any kind of infection from a new variant. I mean, it's not going to bode well for us, Sashi.
I take your point, and we can just hope and pray that things do not get out of hand as it did in the past. Let me now come to some budget matters. Just prior to the budget being presented in Parliament, what did you think of the Minister for Economy's pre-budget roadshow?
I whenever sort of I happen to pick up the newspaper or attend on the news, the local news, and see the entourage around the country, and with the attorney generals or the prime minister sitting cross-legged, in front of a drug bowl, saying we're going to do this and we're going to do that. It reminded me that for the other parties, the Electoral Act, Section 116, you have to come up with facts and figures where you're going to get the money from, to do what you're promising. But Sashi, it's so patent that the government side is, insulated from providing these details, the statutory requirements. I mean, who's going to prosecute them? They're going to go around and, like I said, well, let's see. Like I said, you can fool some people some of the time. But like I said, the point of repetition is not, they're not going to buy this time.
All right. I'll leave that there. Let me now discuss the due process of law. Your thoughts on the due process of law. For instance, and I know that this is again sub judice, so we'll have to be cautious as to how we approach this, but I'm talking generally. The instance is the manner in which the termination of the Solicitor General was handled. We can talk about the process of law. Do you think due process was followed in this instance?
The process of law, due process, by its very definition, means that you hear the other side, the odi altrum partem rule. You hear the other side. You give everyone a fair process. Put it in blunt language, you give everyone a fair go. If the rules require that you be served with a show cause element, a summons or a document, or you present yourself before a commission of inquiry to explain your conduct, if the rules require you to abide by these set procedures, then so you should. You can't bypass them. If you bypass them, Sashi, then there hasn't been due process. Now, in this particular case, was it sub judice? But from the material that I have gleaned from the media, that's from the newspapers and the television, from what Mr. Sharma said that happened to him, like being presented with a prepared resignation notice. Sign here, mate. Like a diktat, like sign here. And then upon his refusal to sign, he gets the boot. Where is the due process in that? I ask you. Yeah, this brings me to another point, which I, by your leave, would like to address you on, and for the reception by the audience, is this: that Fiji has a robust judicial system, and our unflinching appreciation goes to the Sri Lankan alumni that they have helped us in the most difficult of times. Our judges and magistrates that have come from Sri Lanka in their own troubled country and come and are helping us. We owe it to them. My hats off to them. But there is two attendant problems with our judicial institution in Fiji. One is delay in process. The other is delay in judgments. The old saying, Shashi, you as a lawyer know, a justice delayed is justice denied. In a case such as this, if you were to compare Nico Newakula's case, the former member of parliament now serving some prison time for his office, defalcations in the parliamentary standing orders vis-a-vis his allowance collections. If you compare that with the time frame in which that case was dealt with, Mr. Sharma's case should have been there should have been a resolution by now. And that hasn't happened. So, the jury is still out on it, but everyone's asking, why? Why is it so long to give a decision?
All right, well said. That case we follow with interest. Which brings me to my next point. In almost all democracies, as you know, there is a separation of powers. The doctrine of the separation of powers divides the institutions of government into three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislature makes the laws, the executive puts the laws into operation, and obviously the judiciary interprets the laws. Using the same example, do you think there is a real separation of powers in Fiji? If yes, why? And if not, why not?
I firmly believe that there is a separation of powers, both in principle and in practice, for the simple reason the legislative cannot interfere with the judiciary because they make the laws. They cannot issue a diktat to the judiciary to implement it in a particular way. So that is absent. And you must accept that. It's no recorded case of where the legislature has ever in Fiji said, this is the law, this is how we've made it, and this is, as a footnote to that legislation, ascribe saying this is how you should apply it. That hasn't happened. Now, take that in the case of the executive. There has been no recorded or publicized instance of the executive telling the judiciary in which way to behave Now, listen very carefully. I submit and I maintain that the separation of powers exists. But because of our special tier of the judicial institution, where the lower courts are subordinate to the higher courts, that is, the magistracy is beholden to the high court, and high court, Sashi, in Fiji, by its very nature, has unlimited jurisdiction. Unlimited, absolutely. So there have been times, particularly within the COVID restriction promulgation period from its inception, that the high courts have dictated to the lower courts as to how to deal with cases of breach of those prescriptions in the COVID protocols. So you might say that came by via of judicial, discretion, that sort of thing. And in judicial systems, discretion can be narrow, it can be wide, it can be unlimited. That's how you explain it.
All right, well explained. Moving on, last week on SSTP program, my chief guest was Mr. Savanathan Narumbe. And during that interview, Mr. Narumbe raised the issue of human rights abuse in Fiji as a concern. Fiji has a Fiji Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Commissioner. How effective a role does this office play in safeguarding the basic human rights of the Fijian people?
On a level of, say, a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it about 3. I haven't come across one case or any instance of this particular organization safeguarding the rights of the ordinary citizens in Fiji. I have seen comments, post the incident, the commissioner, the human rights commissioner, coming out with comments saying, I will look into it. That's just about it. But anything concrete? No. But the other question, it is begging the question though, how does an organization such as this safeguard the rights? How do you do that? Commenting on what your right ought to be or what your right is not safeguarding it. Safeguarding is prior implementation, putting in places measures to see that there is no abuse of the so-called rights that you're supposed to protect. And this is not happening. We have had many cases, nothing to do with the Fiji Human Rights Commission, but this is the good work of the monitoring agencies, the police force, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the FICAC maybe, but not so much the FICAC as the DPP, that errant police officers or those officers that are in the streets have been prosecuted, had probably been, facing criminal charges. Some have been prosecuted. They have been sentenced. Others are facing charges. But these things do happen. But as far as the Human Rights Commission is concerned, I think personally, it's a dead duck.
All right. Having said that, what sort of role should this office then be playing in getting the message to the Fijian people, perhaps on what constitutes human rights abuses and what action the population can take, perhaps also in educating the powers such as the police personnel, etc., on what is required in terms of dealing with perpetrators within the law? Should there be an educational sort of approach from this office?
Well, I'll put it this way, Sachet. Dissemination in a language, in the vernacular, both the Itoke, the English, and of course the Hindi, all across the country and the neighboring islands. Having small teams visit to explain that these are some of your basic rights, the infringement of which gives you an unfettered right to lodge a complaint, not only to the police, but to the Human Rights Commission, so that perhaps they can be the imprimatur to get the police to do their work. But this doesn't happen. You will remember on the same in the same note that previously under the earlier governments, before Mr. Bainimarama took over the reins of this country, we had the ombudsman. And the ombudsman was the go-to office for any sort of abuse by the civil servants, by the police, by ordinary people, just anybody. And he would filter these complaints and look at what had merit and what was frivolous. But that institution is not there. And Sashi, whilst I'm here, talking to you and to the listeners around the world, if Mr. Chaudhry and the Labour Party were to get back into holding the reins of this country, form a government, ombudsman, the creation of an ombudsman's office is imperative. We will have an ombudsman, so that what is lacking with the Fiji Human Rights Commission now will at least be performed by an ombudsman's office.
Okay, well said. Overseas, we have different ombudsmans for different sectors of our community, as you very well know. And I certainly had dealings in the past with the Ombudsman's office in Fiji, and they do play a very, very effective and important role in so far as the public is concerned. And I certainly would applaud that if the Ombudsman's office in Fiji could be re-established. You are watching Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Let me give you a hint as to who our chief guest will be next Sunday. Our chief guest for next week will be a gentleman who has had 17 years of experience as a political and public affairs specialist, as well as in the trade and investment in Fiji. Our chief guest next week has been a past president of the Fiji JCs as well. Let me see if you can guess who our chief guest will be. I shall reveal our chief guest name at the end of this program. Viewers, while you're listening to Mr. Haroon Ali Shah, you can write your comments if you'd like to guess who our chief guest will be. But in the meanwhile, it's my pleasure to be speaking to Mr. Haroon Ali Shah this afternoon, former Member of Parliament and lawyer, and a current member of the Fiji Labour Party. Haroon, as we head towards the home stretch, a few more questions, if I may please. Fiji, the way the world should be, was once the slogan for tourism in Fiji. Now things have changed so much. Debts have spiraled to over $9 billion. Do you have any views on the current debt situation in the country?
I'll repeat the comments that have been generally floating here in Fiji recently. Beyond our debt levels currently are beyond settling within the long-term, governance in the near future, where we just don't know as what the next government is going to do. Is to how to pay back this sort of approaching nine plus billion dollars that we owe to overseas countries, and bearing in mind, Sashi, that any further loans, be it for operational costs or any special category of assistance to our country, the lenders always insist that there must be good governance. And the two go together. In times of emergency, countries will assist us. But taking on from what's happened to Sri Lanka, I dread the day that we could or may become a default nation. I pray to God that we never do. But like I said, facts are facts, and you default loans that we keep on taking. Loans are loans we need to pay back at some point in time, whether it be a soft loan or a long-term loan. But we need to, get our heads together to see how we are going to service these loans, because not only servicing the national debt is a priority, but is how to get our people to rise above poverty levels whilst we are attending to this, international debt situation. Those are very worrisome concerns, Sashi.
Indeed, very worrisome indeed. Now, you have grown up in the sugar city. At one time, the sugar industry was very viable. How do you view the sugar industry today?
It's on the decline, Sashi. Before we had in excess of some 13,000 sugarcane contract holders. It has, I think, dwindled to just a fraction of that. You see, what has happened in my area, that where I come from, this is the Bunda cane belt. We have lost 90% of sugarcane contract holders because for some reason, for one reason or another, like the area has been declared a tourism development area. So the people have just put down their cane knives and their sugarcane harvesting machines and saying, look, we'll reparcel our land and sell it to the tourism industry. And other places, other cane belt areas where the leases have expired and there has been non-renewals, people have moved out. And the rising cost of production of sugarcane. You see, when we talk about sugarcane industry, people generally think of how many tons of sugar you get from how many tons of sugarcane, raw sugarcane. But that is not the consideration that people really should have. People should look at what are the production costs from the time that you till the land. You till the land, then you put in your sugarcane, you buy the seedlings, you nurture it, you put in the fertilizer prices have hit the ceiling. Your harvesting production costs take a toll on you. Harvesting cost, if you're looking at an $80 per ton, gross payment, and your harvesting cost exceeds $40, you are left with next to nothing. This is why people are shying away from, sticking to sugarcane industry. And it's pervasive. It's all over the country, Viti level and Vanua level. And that's what's troubling us, Sashi.
And sticking with the sugar industry, or how it has dwindled in terms of production and where it stands today, do you think the current government has done enough to protect the sugar industry?
I would be joking if I said yes, Sashi. Look, for whatever reasons, I just can't comprehend. You look at what they have done. They closed the Penang mill. Okay, they said it's not viable to keep it alive. They had a team over here from India to revamp our mills. Nothing happened, and they just went back. Our mills are pretty antiquated, old machinery. They're doing their best under trying times. But this government has done next to nothing. It has not inculcated in the minds of the landlords, the landholders, to say that, look, open up your idle land areas. Give it to the tillers. Give it to the farmers. Let them work on it. Let them produce sugarcane. You know what is the price of maybe a 10 kilo of sugar pack these days? It's in excess of $20, and we produce sugar locally. There was a time during this current government's reign where, because we had to sell sugar to our contracted partners overseas, that we had to buy sugar from overseas countries at an open market price and then to resell it to our contracted partners at a much lower fixed price, because we were contractually bound so to do. This is what has happened. And this government, it has taken a devil-may-care attitude, to the sugar
Okay.
industry.
Well said. And speaking of this government, you have said that it's time for a change in government. You've called on that. Pray do tell, why did you make that statement? Why do you stand by those words? What about the performance of the Fiji First government that is on the nose that you seek a change of government?
Let me be very straightforward. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give this government 4. The reason being, they have more than 10 years to really turn things around, to make Fiji, the way the world should be. But they have moved away on a tangent. Labour Party, Sashi, Labour Party intends to bring in a rejuvenation of social policies, a inclusive policy at all levels, at labor levels, at industry levels, educational levels, primary healthcare, housing, whatever it is, managing our national resources to get the maximum returns for it, to see that everyone, that every citizen of this country has an equitable share at the end of the day. What concerns me as a man, in declining years, I'm not getting any younger. And like I said, I've got no more mountains to climb, except perhaps potentially fight in this election and then be part of a government that can bring this country around. But what my main concern is this, that what legacy are we as people who are articulate, people who have got their brains about them, people who can think clearly, what legacy are we going to leave for our children? We have had our days. We have done our days. We have fought the good fight. What can we leave behind for the next generation and the generation to follow? We don't want to leave a bankrupt country and see turmoil and strife, and that people can't, when they go home and they tell the children, look, son, I'm sorry, forget about chocolates. I can't get chocolate. Chocolate is out of the picture. But talk about getting you a loaf of bread every morning. That's going to be tough. So actually, let me just tell you my personal experience. This is the day when my missus did not make roti in the morning. I don't generally buy bread. I'm a roti man. But when I went to the bread shop, Sashi, a loaf of bread, a sliced white long loaf. You know how long a sliced white long loaf is? $3.40. $3.40 for a sliced white long loaf. A quarter pound of butter to go with it, $3.80. So bread and butter are looking at close to $7 plus. Guess, to have a breakfast, how much would you have to earn? You'd have to work at least a minimum of 3 hours to be able to afford a loaf of bread and a butter, with minimum wages being about, say, something like about $2.83 to $3 an hour.
Wow.
Is that going to be our future? It is going to be if this government stays in power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You just very briefly mentioned fighting the election. Have you been declared a Fiji Labour Party provisional candidate as yet?
No,
And if
Sashi.
not, then when will you be declared a candidate or a provisional candidate, as the buzzword is?
I have put my fillers out. I have no secrets. I'm an open book. You read me as you see me. And as I speak here, and I've spoken previously, former lawyer, disbarred lawyer, good talker. So I've told the Labour Party what I can do for the Labour Party. God willing, I have my sanity about me, maybe I will be able to contribute to a good extent, something, to make Fiji a better place. Sachi, all these years, having studied abroad for over, say, 15 odd years being out of this country, I have never once sought a permanent residency in any other country whatsoever.
All right. And when will the Fiji Labour Party announce its next batch of candidates? Do you know?
Very soon. And it's up to the leader.
How soon is very soon?
Your guess is as good as mine. So we're looking at within the next 2 weeks.
All right. I can wait for that long. And what is the Fiji Labour Party's message to the people?
It is a simple message. And assume for a moment that I'm Mr. Chaudhry. So I will talk in the first person.
Go ahead.
What we are offering you is policies that will ensure that every citizen of this country gets an equitable share of whatever resources that we have, that we will be honest in our dealings with you, that we will take care of you within our ability and with our resources so to do, and we will never, ever lie to you or mislead you in our dealings with you or in our dealings with the international community. Give us an opportunity, and Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry will show you what he could have done with Fiji 80 years ago when he was unlawfully ousted from being a leader of this country. Even the courts at that time, if you remember that famous case, Sashi, that the late Mr. Lesini Ngarase versus Frank Bainimarama, the Court of Appeal said to Mr. Bainimarama and his counsel, Mr. Chaudhry is the right man. Go back, give the reins to him. You go back to the barracks. That's the message I'm repeating to the listeners. Give Mr. Chaudhry a chance. And let's see, God knows, we'll turn this country around, Sashi.
Haroon, what is your message? What is Haroon Ali Shah's message to the public?
To the listeners in Sydney, good day to you. To the folks in New Zealand, kia ora. To the people of Fiji, Yandra Vinaka. This is Mr. Haroon Ali Shah talking to you. You've seen me before. Some say he talks too much. Some say he talks all the time. But no one has ever said he's talking nonsense. So my message to you, to my listeners, to my good friends, and thanks be to the SSTP program, my message to you is, you see me as I am. Plain and simple. I wish I could look you in the eyes and get you to read into my soul that if the Labour Party is elected, and fortunately for me, if I'm part of the team, or even if I'm not part of the team, but I will never shirk from my responsibilities. I will never stop being selfless. I die a happy man, knowing that I've done some good for the people of Fiji, Sashi. And
Well
that is...
said. Well said indeed. And Nina Moreno, we haven't forgotten the USA. We've got viewers in a lot of parts of the world, including American Samoa, Japan, USA, India, and lots more countries. But well said. And Haroon, you've just participated in your first SSTP program. Do you have any comments about the SSTP program interview that you've just taken part in?
It's a privilege, Sashi, and it's my pleasure to be here. You've given me a golden opportunity. It is not my habit to volunteer and go and proselytize and stand up in front of people and try and convert them. No, I don't do that. I'm a deeply religious man, Sashi, and your program has exposed me to the people for what I am. You be the judge, listeners. You be the judge, Sashi. But it's through your medium that people like me, if they have an ounce of goodness, and if they can part with this goodness for the benefit, for the smile on the faces of others. So God bless you, Sashi, and God bless this program. May this program survive us and continue for a long, long time.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Haroon. Let me share a couple of things with our viewers today. Haroon was a trendsetter as we were growing up in Wayavi Lautoka. Some of us, and I'll mention, for example, Peggy Swaroop, who lived just across your home. There was Gerald, etc., in Wayavi. So, to a lot of us young boys in Wayavi, Haroon, you were a trendsetter. We looked up to you, and we always admired the tenacity that you had. You not only walked the walk, you talked the talk as well. And that has continued over the years. And I appreciate you taking part in this program today. A big Vinaka Vakalevu, Shukriya, and thank you very much for being chief guest in Sashi Singh's talking point today. It has been my absolute pleasure to have you as a chief guest today. I thank you for discussing the various topics that I've raised in today's program. Your frank views and responses to my question, they've all been most appreciated. Now, before you go, let me extend an invitation to you and to the Fiji Labour Party, an open invitation to participate in SSTP once more once the writ of elections is issued, to put forward your and your party's manifesto, if you'd like, or further views or appeals to the general public before the elections. And you'll be more than welcome to appear on this program. How does that sound to you?
Absolutely wonderful. It's deeply embedded in my heart and my mind. Your generosity for having me today, Sashi. And I'll pass your invitation to Mr. Mahendrapal Chaudhry. And once the writ of election, once the candidates are announced, we'll liaise with you and perhaps get you to allocate us a time.
Indeed, as I said, it's an open invitation that exists. Thank you once again, Haroon. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was Mr. Haroon Ali Shah. Haroon, wishing you a very blessed Sunday. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.
Well, there you have it for episode 30. And I thank all those viewers who have taken time to provide their positive feedback with regards to the program. SSTP, we ask the questions that Fijians all over the world want answers to. As I say, Fijians want to know. Well, episode 30 done and dusted. A big thank you to my regular contributor, Nikhil Singh, for his input in the program today. To my SSTP team, a very big thank you as well. I'd also like to thank you, our viewers, for watching this program today. Our chief guest next week will be a gentleman who has had 17 years of experience as a political and public affairs specialist, as well as in trade and investment in Fiji. Our chief guest next week has been a past president of the Fiji JCs. Let me now reveal the name of our chief guest for next week. This is where we should have had a drum roll. Our chief guest next week will be Mr. Nirmal Singh Chima, who is well known in Fiji amongst all sectors of the Fijian society. That should make for an interesting interview, as we have a lot to discuss with our chief guest, a gentleman that has Fiji in his heart. So until next Sunday, I wish you all a very safe and happy week. Haroon Ali Shah stole my thunder partway through the program. As I always conclude my program, I leave you with a quote. And today I leave you with this quote from Abraham Lincoln, a quote that Haroon used today. Nevertheless, as Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. I'll run that by you again. You can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. That quote from Abraham Lincoln. Well, that's it for episode 30 of Sashi Singh's Talking Point. Till the next program, I am Sashi Singh, wishing you goodbye, namaste, and ni samore. Thank you and goodbye, world.